How's it going, friends, and welcome to episode 5 of the Cynical Den Podcast. It's New Year's Eve, well, by the time this goes up at least, which I suppose necessitates the obligatory 2016 in review podcast episode. I'm sure some of you are thinking that I'm gonna join the rank and file and be like, 2016 sucks, I can't wait for it to be over, but I'm not gonna do that, and fuck you for thinking that I would. I'm just kidding, I don't hate you all that much. It's pretty clear that the pervasive opinion among most people is that 2016 sucked, particularly echoed by certain demographics for reasons that are pretty obvious. 2016 was quite a busy year in terms of the things that were going on in the world. Global politics was pretty important. We had social issues, which is just a pungent fucking delight. So, of course, 2016 is going to be an important year, I think, when people look back on it. But was it the worst? I mean, fucking really? I think it's worth starting by stating outright that 2016 was not the worst year ever. I mean, it's impossible. Any time before like 1950 was a categorically worse year just in general. No internet. TV was only just invented. The sanitation was worse. There was worse hygiene. People's health was worse. And of course, it gets much worse when you start moving backwards. 2016 sucks. I'd rather live in 1216, back when everybody was dying all the time because they had no idea why people were coughing blood. This is something that I always think about because I am that much of a wanker. As I think about, oh, well, okay, yeah, this year sucks, but it's been much worse throughout most of human history. And in fact, even in like the worst years that you'll have if you live in a Western country, it doesn't really rival what some people are living just every year. I think I mentioned this before, but I imagine that a Somalian kid thinks every year sucks equally badly. I mean, as far as they're concerned, 2016 is no different from 2015. Their parents are still dead, they still don't have any water or food, and they almost got shot by Somalian pirates. So yeah, Trump won, but I think that's the least of their concerns at the moment. I'm Fringy, and I ruin everything for everyone. What I perceive to be the 4 main reasons why people hate 2016 are Trump winning, Brexit, Syria and the refugee crisis, and a lot of celebrities dying. Now, immediately, you can tell one of these things is not like the other. For some reason, it seems like there are specific years where a lot of celebrities just start dropping. I think 2009 was the first time that I really noticed this, because it was like Michael Jackson, Billy Maves, Farrah Fawcett, Brittany Murphy, I think. And this year, we've had a ton, and unfortunately, a lot of them were people that I did like. We had Alan Rickman, who will forever go down as Hans Gruber, the best villain from the Die Hard series. We had David Bowie, and we had Prince as well, I think. And the most notable one as of late is Carrie Fisher, which was only a few days ago, among many others. I understand being upset about these deaths, especially when a lot of these people were very inspirational or aspirational for some people. And they all seem like pretty good people, but I don't really think that people dying that you didn't know makes the year bad. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people died this year, and nobody gave a shit. What a happy note this podcast is starting on. It always struck me as weird when these are the sort of things that people prioritize in terms of how good or bad the year was. People you didn't know died, and you place that similarly to, like, geopolitics. It's strange. I'm not saying your priorities are wrong. Well, I mean, that is what I'm saying, but what I'm trying to get across is that I can understand these things kind of sour the year for you, but I don't really think that that's a great qualifier for the year sucking. There are other things that are going on that are a lot more important in terms of how they impact people's lives. The main reason that people seem to hate 2016 is politically, which is very subjective because clearly a lot of people disagree with those opinions. What do I mean by this? Well, when people say 2016 sucks because Trump won or because Brexit happened, you're effectively saying 2016 sucks because democracy didn't play out in my favor. If only it were like Zimbabwe, where your vote doesn't fucking matter. As though it's just a travesty that the vote didn't go the way you want. It seems like these people aren't very accustomed with losing, which I think makes sense since a lot of the people saying these things are under 30, which means that the only elections they voted in the US were where Obama won twice in a row. So they were probably quite happy with that outcome. And then they're not familiar with losing, which happens and is going to happen. And every election, a lot of people aren't going to be happy. That's just how it is. Usually I'm never happy because I I rarely like either of the candidates. And I think that issue was especially prominent in the US. Whoever wins, it's not swell outcome, but at the same time, it's just get used to it. Like they said in South Park, it's usually a choice between a douche and a turd, just get used to it. It's a very self-absorbed view in my opinion, because they fail to realize that while they may think that 2016 sucks because of the outcome of the US election, clearly a lot of people disagree with you. That's how the outcome of the election played out this way. For a lot of other people, 2016 wasn't all that bad, or more aptly, 2016 would have been a lot worse for them if the result was reversed. And the same applies for the Brexit vote as well. I mean, in terms of real things that are going on that I could say, yeah, that's an objectively bad thing, is what's going on in the Middle East. But the Middle East is always unstable. It's been unstable for 40 years. It's not really anything new here. Oh, in 2016, the Middle East was unstable. Oh, okay. And in 2016, the Middle East will also be unstable. You see what I'm getting at? I mean, it's all of the issues that happened with 2016 are either incredibly subjective or have just been problems for the last few decades. Conversely, nobody can argue that 2008 was a swell year because the global financial crisis is an objectively bad thing, unless you just hate being employed or having money. And how people's memories have faded so quickly, forgetting about all these awful years that have happened in the 21st century. 2001, 9/11 and Afghanistan, 2003, Iraq, and of course the global financial crisis in 2008. Now, you know, personally, military conflicts and the crash of the stock market are a little bit more important than not being pleased with how people in your country decided to vote. I'm not even expressing my opinion on the election. I mean, I have on a few other occasions, but I really don't care. I didn't like any of the candidates, so I wasn't really fussed either way, but people need to just calm down. It's not that big a deal. You can go out and vote in 4 years, and maybe 2020 will be the worst year ever if the outcome isn't the way you wanted. Get used to it. It's an election. You're not gonna get your way every time. This certainly isn't me trying to say how great 2016 was, because it wasn't. Compared to other years, it really wasn't that great, particularly in terms of the social degradation and seeing how many people just really were twats when push came to shove. There were some very bad attitudes that sort of cropped up in 2016. Unlike any of the other elections beforehand, despite how similar these elections always are and how people always forget that every 4 years, people act the same way. Maybe it was a convergence of these social issues coming to a head in the same year that kind of caused everybody to lose their minds and start flipping out and disowning their friends and family members for voting the wrong way. That's actually happened to people. I mean, I wish I was kidding, but I've seen too many stories about it. And then we see the rise of these phony hate crimes and people losing their minds, the media going apeshit crazy and just flipping out, as well as people on the internet in the little alternative press getting a little bit insane as well. Not to name names, but there are a lot of people who have been acting like idiots for the past 6 months. And what was it for? The election of two people that most people didn't really like, or a vote that probably will get negated in a couple of years anyway, or non-issues. It seems unnecessarily panicky to get this upset about 2016. I don't really think that the people who say this year sucked can actually say that the year itself was bad for them. I talked about this with someone on Twitter, but they disagreed with me when I said 2008 was a bad year for the world, because they said that year wasn't personally bad for them. But I'm not talking about whether the year was personally bad for you, because that depends. Everybody has good years and bad years. Some people probably didn't really like 2015 because someone died in the family, or they lost their job, or the bank foreclosed on their house, or someone got ill. These are things that will really ruin a year for you, because while global politics is important, what should be more important in determining how good or bad the year was your life and what happened in your life. What did you do? What went wrong? What happened to your family members? Or was something good for your family members? You know, these are the things that should really determine what a good year for you is. I have had bad years, and those were dictated by what was going on around me, as opposed to, oh, someone I didn't like won an election. Was 2016 great? No, but I'd rather be alive in 2016 than 1942 or 1916 or during most periods of human history. I get the impression soldiers fighting in Stalingrad would be keen to trade places with these stupid morons on Twitter. They'd be fucking thrilled. I find it fascinating how many gamers have also said that 2016 sucks, since when it comes to video games, 2016 has been a pretty good year with a lot of great titles. And this is coming from me, one of the pessimistic gamers you'll ever see. 2016 saw the revival of the modern shooter campaign with Doom and Titanfall 2. Both excellent games in terms of single player. While the multiplayer in Doom was kind of while the multiplayer in Titanfall was awesome, both excelled in gameplay and general structure in terms of a campaign, which is lacking in so many shooters. I was briefly talking about this the other day, but something you'll notice with a lot of shooters is that the modern ones just jump all over the place instead of having a focused campaign with a beginning, middle, and end, and a natural progression from the beginning to the end. They just jump all over the place as though a team sat down and were like, all right, we set one mission in Rio, we'll set another mission in China. Is this all good with everybody? Yeah. This is particularly apparent in most recent Call of Duty titles where they're jumping all over the place, as opposed to Call of Duty 4, which still remains their better campaign, where it was all from start to finish set in 2 locations, and it felt like it was a logical progression for a single battle. I was recently rewatching Black Hawk Down, and this is when I started thinking about it. Hey, I like this war movie because it's focused on one battle over the course of pretty much a single day in one city. That makes sense. That's your complete story, this one battle, as opposed to jumping all around the world for some big doomsday plot. Your story doesn't need to be massive in scale to work. It doesn't even need to be deep. Titanfall and Doom demonstrate that. As long as it's consistent and it feels like it's moving in a logical direction, that's going to do a lot more for the pacing of your game, as opposed to just having a checklist of cool places you want to go, and then trying to tie those levels together with the story. XCOM 2 is something of a forgotten gem. I talked about this extensively early in the year, how much I loved XCOM 2. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that it came out because it came out so long ago, but that game is still remaining in my top 5 games of the year. I love XCOM 2. Another overlooked game, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, which was my most anticipated game of the year, was one that too many people overlooked. It was flawed in certain ways, and some of the business practices surrounding it were bad, but it was an exceptionally good RPG, probably one of the best gameplay-wise in terms of moment-to-moment gameplay. It really excelled in that regard and built on top of Human Revolution. While the story was kind of lacking compared to its predecessors, it was still a pretty good plot and miles ahead of most games thematically. It really upsets me that that game has been overlooked, because while the business practices were bad, the game itself was so good that people really needed to give it a chance. And it's on sale right now on Steam. You can get it for like half price. Go buy that game. Seriously, it's one of the best games of the year. I think it's safe to say that the biggest release of the year was Overwatch, which has had a very good first year and has held my attention since May, which is an accomplishment in itself. It's been a long time since I've been able to play the same shooter pretty much for the whole year. The last time that a game has done that for me was probably Modern Warfare 2. More recently, I'll only play a few matches and then I'm done with it. Though it obviously depends on the game, since I recently got Rainbow Six Siege and that game is pretty fun. But Overwatch has done a good job in terms of maintaining a player base. And the fact that they're doing free DLC and also these amazing animated shorts is certainly a good sign. It shows that they're committed to keeping this game alive. Uncharted 4 was definitely a fitting end to the series, though while I would have liked to see what Amy Hennig intended to do after she got booted out of the door, she made the Uncharted series, so it's a little bit disappointing that we didn't get to see how she was going to wrap it up, or if she even was going to wrap it up. And when she left, a lot of the talent with that game left with it. And in fact, I think the game would have been done a lot earlier, because from what I heard, they had to rewrite a lot of the story after Amy Hennig left, because they must have extensively rewritten the script. But I'm still happy with the game we got. I mean, in terms of gameplay, it was probably the best in the series. There have just been so many games that we've had the ability to play this year. There's been tons of games, to the point that it's been impossible to pick them all up. I still haven't bought Dishonored 2 or Gears 4, and there's probably a bunch of other games that I've forgotten about that I wasn't able to buy this year just because there were so many. It just seems strange that there would be people who didn't think the year was all that good when there were so many games that you feasibly couldn't buy them all. Not everything in 2016 in terms of gaming was all that great. I could tell you what I was so indifferent to that you couldn't detect the fucks that I gave with a telescope, and that's this mid-console generation hardware updates. Constantly, you will hear the argument that PC gaming sucks because you've got to upgrade it, which I always find to be a strange argument. I find the ability to upgrade your hardware to be a good thing, especially when you can upgrade these specific components that you want to upgrade. You want to upgrade your CPU? You can do that, and just the CPU. You want to upgrade the GPU? You can upgrade just the GPU. You want to add more RAM? Just add more RAM. It's such a good way of being able to play and update your hardware. But now we have mid-console generation hardware updates. We have to buy a new console outright to experience these updates. And is it really going to be that good? I mean, the PS4 Pro doesn't seem that worth it to me. It's not real 4K gaming. It's upscaled, so it's not 4K. And at the same time, I already bought a PS4, and the PS4 was the only console that I don't really regret buying. And even with that one, I really have no interest in updating that one to get basically a higher resolution but the same frame rate and thus equally shitty effects on gameplay. When I see a hardware update, or when I update my hardware, the primary reason is to get better performance on games. It's not really about the graphics, it's about performance. So if, for example, the PS4 Pro came out and all games on it ran at the same resolution but at 60 frames per second, boost in gameplay, that's a good thing, that's something I could get behind. But when you're just updating the graphics, all you're basically saying is, we don't give a fuck about how the low frame rate affects gameplay, which it does. All we care about is making the game look a little bit prettier. Yeah, it's good to know that the priorities are in the right place here. 2016 was something of a bad year for the industry, which I think very few people can deny if they think about it. Microtransactions are in most games now. They've really infected the industry to its core. We've still got tons of pre-order bonuses and day one DLC, and many titles have sold poorly, especially in the later half of the year. During the first half of the year, games were selling pretty well. But towards the tail end of the year, a lot of games did not sell up to the standard that they needed to. In terms of the games themselves though, 2016 is probably the best year that gaming has had since this console generation started. 2014 was a wet turd, 2015 was something out of an improvement, and 2016 is the filet mignon so far. It's been a pretty solid year for gaming, and I'm quite happy with the games that have released this year. Time for the Q&A section. Remember, if you have any questions you want to ask, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I'll get around to it in the next episode of the podcast. Today, we're going through 2 questions, as there won't be a podcast episode next week. The things I do for you guys. The first question is from Vicho, who asks, what are your thoughts on economies in-game like those of Team Fortress 2 and CSGO, which involve third-party organizations setting real-world values for items that can be traded, and in turn, make a profit that can be exchanged out for fluid cash? This is a very good question. For those who are unfamiliar, basically the way that it seems to work with games like CSGO and Team Fortress 2 is that they have these third-party gambling websites where people can bet real money for things like skins and weapons, I'm guessing, but I think the main thing is getting these rare skins or knives and things like that, which can then also be put in again to be gambled on to make money. It's this strange sort of new economy that's arisen out of these games, where the in-game economy is translating into the real world with people gambling on skins and things like that. Now, immediately, when you hear that, you should be thinking, well, that sounds exploitable as fuck, and turns out it certainly is. I mean, systems like these are inherently bad in the sense that they prey on the gullible and are designed to exploit people. The way that these things are designed to where they're trying to elicit reaction from people with rare items or, you know, legendary items, things that people will get crazy about, where the value for them is not the actual aesthetic itself, but the rarity of the aesthetic. That's what they're going for. They want something that's rare so that they can show off. It's preying on that kind of attitude, which is very common among some people. It's genius, but it's scummy as fuck. One of the ways that it has been exploited is with children gambling on these third-party websites, which means some of these websites are outright breaking the law because it is gambling. When you're putting in money for something that you're trying to win, for which you may not get a return on your investment at all, that's gambling. As we saw with the CSGO Lotto controversy, fuckwits that I won't name would hide their association with the website, which they had established, and then make shill videos of them gambling on this website with the videos themselves with the sole purpose of incentivizing their viewers to gamble. There is no entertainment value in watching someone gamble. The only reason these videos are up is because they want to get these people who watch them to think, I can gamble too. I can win those skins too. I will be the envy among my friends. It's fucking awful. It really is. It pisses me off. This is where the law needs to catch up because as it stands right now, systems like these, while pretty smart, are way too easily abused. I'm not saying that it should be banned because, I mean, it is the free market. If people want to gamble and waste their money, that certainly is their prerogative. But I just don't like the way that they're doing it. I don't like this system. Our second question is from Astral Assassin, who asks, if they both continue as they're going now, where do you think the gaming industry and gaming community will be in 5 to 10 years? It's somewhat difficult to say where the industry is going because of how rapidly gaming is evolving as an industry, and it's very difficult to draw a comparison between gaming and TV or film or music to gauge the direction of the medium because it is a radically different industry. To be the jaded person, I think the industry will probably crash within the next 10 years for a few key reasons. Mainly that games cost too much to produce, take too long to make, and are not selling well enough to be sustainable. To sell 1 million copies of a game in 1997 was a very good thing, but that was when titles didn't have development and marketing costs rivaling a Marvel film. The introduction of microtransactions and DLC into gaming, I feel, is a response from these companies to try and make money where they can't make money otherwise, because as it stands, they're just not making enough money. See, it's easy enough to chalk it up to greed, and it certainly is greed, but instead of making the decision to maybe develop the game on a smaller budget, maybe not go so huge, they instead decide to implement microtransactions and DLC to make more money. Now, while free DLC is becoming a little bit more prominent, which is certainly a good thing, like I said before, most games have microtransactions, which I definitely don't like. Moving into the next 5 years or so, I imagine VR will become somewhat more prominent, just given how many companies are investing in it. Unlike motion controls, VR provides something of a unique experience that doesn't inhibit gameplay. It sort of enhances the immersion factor of it, whereas motion gaming doesn't really do a whole lot. All it does is simplify the controls. While I don't really intend to invest in the technology for a few years, or until there are more games that are released for VR, I think there's a lot of potential in this emerging aspect of gaming. That about does it for episode 5 of the podcast. Thank you for watching. Feel free to follow Crude Penguin via the website or on Twitter and Facebook. The links are available in the description. There'll be no episode next week, but there should still be updates on the website in terms of new comics, and I plan on releasing a roadmap for what's happening with Crude Penguin moving into 2016, since we're actually fast approaching year 2 of Crude Penguin. It's almost been a whole year since it started, and what a good year it's been in terms of Crude Penguin. With that, I'll say Happy New Year, chaps, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Cynical Den Podcast.